Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest edition of the Gersnet Weekly Podcast, hosted by myself, Craig Ray. Well, we're unfortunately going to have to do a massive debrief from the last 24 hours or so at Rangers, the tumultuous last 24 hours or so at Rangers. Just a wee apology. The fact that we never had the podcast on Friday, there was a few wee issues with that, so we couldn't get it out, unfortunately. But we are back today to discuss everything Rangers. Another wee apology in advance as well. I've got a wee bit of a cold or something wrong with me, so if I need to cough or I need to sneeze, don't worry, I will mute. You might just see a wee hang me in the background or something like that, but I will mute it so you don't need to hear the goings on. But just before we get into it, then, I need to introduce you to my guest. First up, Colin Armstrong. Colin, how are you doing?
Hi, as well as could be under the circumstances, I suppose. I was out and about today to try and, get it out of the system. So I was sitting with my daughter, so we went up Arthur's Street today. Always find, big long walk helps get it out, and this will maybe help as well.
No, well, let's hope it does. And of course, you can't have Colin without Eck, can you? Eck, how you doing?
Yeah, no bad, Craig. Nice to be on yourself, mate. Nice to be on yourself. And the last time I saw you on the pod, you were wearing a nice hat, and I thought I better get one for myself. Seeing as Craig's on the night. The only one I've got is this one for the 2000 Scottish Cup final, which is all about a Dutch manager. So I thought, no, that's just not appropriate. So you're just going to have to look at my baldy nap on the night.
Very, very apt, Eck. And speaking of baldy nappers, we've also got David Fraser on as well. David, I think this is the first time we've been acquainted that I'm already taking the mick out of you.
That'll be the last as well.
Yeah. How you doing, mate, anyway?
Not too bad, Craig. Considering all things the lads have nearly outlined, but we'll see if this conflab over the next hour or so is cathartic in any way, shape or form. But less of the digs, I would say, Craig.
No, don't worry about it. You know what I'm like anyway. No, thanks for introducing yourself, guys, and just a wee introduction to the podcast as well. This is obviously the Gersnet Podcast. It's an independent Rangers podcast made for fans by fans, and all content is free. We do obviously have the forum with articles. I know I had one published last week. I think I've got another one tomorrow at some point as well. And obviously the podcast and history archive as well. You can get us over at www.gersnet.co.uk. And just before we start, just a little message from our sponsors, who are Forest Precision Engineering. They're a subcontract Glasgow-based engineering company who have been a big commercial supporter of Rangers for many years, and we're absolutely delighted that they're backing our pod. You can get them over at www.forestprecisioneng.com. And don't forget, you can also visit the Forest Precision Executive Lounge, which is the stunning new hospitality area within the historic main stand. For information on how to book this unique and intimate space, you can email the club via hospitality@rangers.co.uk. Well, now that the niceties are out the way, we may as well just jump right into it. We know why we're here, to discuss what happened, not just yesterday, but I think the whole picture as a whole. Colin, I'll start with you. What's sort of your take on the current position of the club, certainly from the footballing standpoint, and your opinion on the manager's position just now?
In terms of the manager's position, it's becoming almost impossible to defend it, really, isn't it? I've been sort of advocating that we don't react. We give him a bit of time. I felt he'd earned a bit of time with his run to the Europa League last season. I also think the injury situation is just horrific. I can't recall a time when the injury situation was as bad as this. But that said, there's just so much going on now. The incident with Kamara yesterday, which we'll go on to talk about, the standard, the performances. I think my feeling building up to this was just get to the World Cup break, in touch with them, try and get some players back and give the guy a chance to rectify the situation. But it's just been a total collapse really over the last few weeks. And I thought the first half yesterday we actually played okay. We looked fairly bright, didn't create a huge amount, but we looked bright. But the second half was a farce for the get-go. I was a wee bit surprised they subbed Kamara. Obviously that's led to issues as well. Leon King, I mean, obviously we hope he's okay. He took a dull one yesterday, but I mean, his contribution to that goal was a bit farcical. And the feeling with this Rangers team is when they concede, you think, oh, that's it. It felt at that point the best we were getting was a draw. You just didn't feel that they had 2 goals in them. So, yeah, I mean, he's starting to look really lost, I think. When you see him on the touchline, he just doesn't look like he's the guy that can turn this around. So, it's becoming very, very difficult to defend. It'll be interesting to see what the club does next because, people say it's easy just to sack a manager, but it isn't. You've got to consider the compensation. You've got to consider, well, who do you bring in? What do you bring in a temporary to the end of the season, or do you actually go for your next permanent manager now? So there's a few big decisions coming the club's way over the next few weeks, and it's disappointing because I know domestically last season it did struggle at times. It felt to me that the season ended just too soon last season for Rangers. I felt we were on a good run of form from sort of April onwards, and that game at Celtic Park, I thought we showed, I felt if they'd won that day, they'd have been sweating a wee bit towards the title, but the draw wasn't quite enough. We obviously beat them in the semi-final, and there was just wee signs that you thought, once he gets his own players in, once he gets a full pre-season, things will improve, and he's already shown that he's a good manager. We're getting us to a Europa League final. He's won us the Scottish Cup. But it's went the other way. You'd have to say it's completely went the other way. I don't just blame Gio here. Part of me feels for him, actually. I think others have got their share of the blame, and I think some of the senior players as well have to really take a look at themselves, because some of the effort from some of them, look, if he's not the man for the job, that's fine. But I always think professional pride kicks in. Once you're on that park, you should be wanting to win games, and a lot of them look like they just can't be arsed. I mean, Alfredo Morelos yesterday, it was a fucking embarrassing performance, let's be honest. I mean, me and Eck spoke about a year ago at that semi-final against Hibs, and it feels like we're back there. We were 3-0 down at half-time. Morelos, he didn't even phone it in that day. It was another absolute shit rare performance, and we're back to square one with him. And I don't know how many times we're going to give him the opportunity to let us down. I'm done with him. I really am. He's a great player, but his attitude is stinking at times, and I think you saw that yesterday. And there was a couple of wee things he'd done. There was one he had the ball when he went to cross it in, and I think it went out the ground. You know what I mean? And he just looks like he couldn't give a toss. So yeah, Gio's not good enough. I think we can see that now. But I think there's other people involved that need to take their share of the blame in this.
Yeah, I think you make a good few points there, Colin, in terms of the whole collective effort as a whole, and the fact that maybe it isn't just the manager's fault. And I know we will sort of touch on that later on as well. A couple of points you make, Eck. Similar question to Colin. What's your sort of summary of what's happening now and where the manager is?
Well, the main thing for me is that the manager, the way he's coming across now himself. I've spent the whole season so far, and a few times last season as well. The back end of last season when Gio was in situ, defending him and saying that people were reading into his body language after press conferences and that. And I'm saying I don't really care. I actually had this thing that to me I can't get my head around the fact that a guy who can get a Scottish club to a European final then can't beat St Johnstone away, even with the players that we have. I'm exactly the same as Colin. We disagree about a lot of things being Colin, but one thing we're definitely in agreement about was, for example, the Champions League, group stage shouldn't. We shouldn't let that skew the judgment. That's something that could happen, especially to a club in our position. I keep harping on about 2012 and how we're still kind of recovering for that. But he's made a complete fool of us in the last. Basically, we stood outside after the Ajax game at Ibrox a few weeks ago, saying, look, he's got these 3 games, and then we should make a judgment, before we make any judgment once it gets to the World Cup break. But I think it was implied that we were going to win the 3 games, and he's won one of them. I'm the same as I can't help thinking about the injuries. The centre half problem is like, being a centre-half for Rangers is like being a resident of Cabot Cove or Midsummer, you know what I mean? Or being a distant relation of, Miss Marple. You're not going to see the end of the day. You know what I mean? It's unbelievable what's been happening to the centre-half. That's mitigation. Say, gets a European final, qualified us for the Champions League group stage, stuff that even Steven Gerrard could have done, and he get 3 seasons, But we'll be talking about the players' body language all season. And then with the manager yesterday in his last couple of press conferences, he looked like he can't get out the place fast enough. He's now starting to, maybe it's just all kind of implied, it's just all confirmation bias, but his interview on Sky Sports live yesterday was bad enough. But the wee actual interview with Kerry Nidsan, the wee kind of 30-second job on the sports scene, that seemed even worse. It's just like, you're going to be here after Christmas, Kerry says to him. He's kind of like, we'll see. You know what I mean? It wasn't as bad as that, but the manager himself seems like he couldn't care less. And I'm doing that thing now. People have been saying he's like Pedro. He's no better than Pedro. And I've been laughing that off online and what have you. He's no better than Pedro Caixinha. The best result Pedro Caixinha got was a 3-0 win at Pittodrie. After Aberdeen had played us off the park, with three goals in a counter-attack. This guy's won his second major trophy in 11 years. He's got us to only the 5th European final in our history. He's got us into the Champions League, which seemed like something that could never happen again, after 2012 at certain stages in the way back up. Nothing like Pedro. But yesterday, it was actually like Graham Murray stuff. The stuff with Kamara. And I don't know about you, like I say, maybe confirmation bias, maybe reading too much into this, but there's a wee bit, I wasn't at the game yesterday, I'm watching it on Sky. But when Arfield is coming on at half time and Sky are doing their bit, they just have a wee bit of programme between the adverts now at half time, Sky. And they show you Arfield coming on and he's getting the instructions for Roy Mackay about what he's going to do. He's fucking ignoring them. He's getting his jersey off and he's walking away for Roy Mackay's got the documents out and he's showing him, this is what we want to do. And it might just be, Arfield's like, I better get my jersey on, he's getting himself ready. I don't have time to look at this, I'll come back and see you later. But it just looked like he's kind of blanking him. And then when the second half, just before it starts, the cameras are closing up on Arfield as he comes onto the park at the start of the second half. And if you watch it back, he goes up to John Lundstrom, or John Lundstrom says to him, "Hi, Scotty," and he's got something to say to him. And they might just be talking about the Rami at half time the managers had with Kamara. But there's a look in Scott Arfield's eyes, which is just like, I know what you're going to say to me. And the two of them are just like two senior pros, Arfield being the more senior, who are just kind of saying, look, we'll just do what we've got to do here. I'm imagining, I have no evidence for this, but it's got to the stage in the last 2 or 3 games where I'm just seeing such a lack of intent, which again could be down to, in any other circumstance, it could be down to just, they're tired for last season and for then, for what they've done this season to get themselves into the Champions League group. I mean, it's still amazing results against USG and PSV. There's definitely, a body of evidence to say the team are just run down, and certainly the centre-half problem, the injuries are all being compounded by having to bring in centre-halves quicker than they're actually ready for. But I'm just seeing wee things now. It just looks like it's like Graham Murray with Andy Halliday, in that Scottish Cup semi-final at Park. It just looks like a man who went out of the place and the players are just going through the motions, and that's why we're doing the same stuff all the time, and it looks so lifeless on the park. So up until about a week ago, I was wanting to get into the World Cup and I wanted to see him take it up to January, take it to the next Old Firm game. But now I'm seriously thinking it doesn't even matter if I'm no up for if I'm sticking up for Gio or no. Gio looks like he's not even sticking up for himself.
No, I think you're right again. Similar to Colin, with a lot of the points you're making there, Rick. I think
sorry to crack on. I think it's funny that X pointed out Arfield, because I mentioned that to my mate yesterday. Me and my mate were in the pub watching it. The minute he came on, I was like, he didn't look up for it. Mm-hmm. He actually looked a wee bit scunnered to me. And normally Arfield's someone that comes on that looks right. I'm on here to help and up for it. There was just something about him yesterday, and I said to him, hey, something's not right there. And yeah, you know what it's starting to remind me of? The tail end, the fag end, the Advocate's reign, and there was all sorts of rumours about, arguments with Advocate and all the Dutch players doing their own thing. There was the Dutch players and the non-Dutch players and all that kind of stuff. Now, I know there's no Dutch players there at the moment, but it's starting to feel like that. It's starting to feel like the players have an opinion, but Gio's just blocking them out and saying it's it's my way or the highway, and it's not working. And that's what it feels like to me. You're seeing players that just look really, really disinterested and don't want to work for that manager.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a disharmony between the sort of playing squad and the coaching squad there. I mean, David, what's your sort of take on everything that's happening in the manager's position as well, mate?
Well, I don't want to go over the ground that the boys have discussed there. I think to try and come at the point, the manager's position's untenable. I think the longer the board procrastinate, the worse it's going to be for us as fans. I'm trying to look at the bigger picture, Craig. I think we're a mess. I think the amount of players that are out of contract, the amount of replacements that need to be brought in. I'm looking at, who would possibly take the job? I'm assuming that due to the financial structures of the club, it would probably be shopping for an out-of-luck manager rather than somebody that's in luck. I just see a lot of half-take on the horizon. The boys are totally concur with them. There's been... There's been some development in the background. I think we've been talking about that for most of this season. I think I've been on several pods earlier on, and I think it just didn't look right. And I think they're all trying to struggle to put a finger on it about, was it disarming in the dressing room? Was it the player jailing? Was it, rumours of the club being up for sale in the background and all that? But I think they're just coming to a head. There's players going through the motions. There's players that are trying, but by that, there's a disjointed look to Rangers. They're lethargic. They're making ordinary Scottish sides look reasonable. That's how bad it is. And a number of players are making schoolboy errors. And far less, I'll excuse Liam King. Liam King's just a young boy who's been pitched in. We can discuss the whys and wherefores of whether he'll make it in his preferred position in the long term. But looking at players like James Sands yesterday, he completely unchallenged. I've listened at times where he's gave the ball away without a challenge near him. Just basic stuff like that. I mean, Morelos, Colin mentioned Alfie, and you can try and analyse his body language. You can question the ball bouncing off him, his attitude, all the rest of it. It's just the whole thing just smacks a totally disharmonious setup. And I think, if the board think that we can limp to the end of the season and the status quo, and that maybe a couple of cups might buy them time. I think they're in for a banger shot, to be quite honest with you, this upcoming AGM, and I think a lot of questions will be rightly asked, unless they act before that. But even for by that, if they were to announce a new manager in the coming days, Craig, I still think that the legitimate questions would be asked on the AGM, and I can only hope that they see the bigger picture and they move quickly, because it's only going one way under this guy, and it's not going to result in trophies, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I think the key word that you've used there, David, is disharmony. I think that's quite evident. I mean, the place that I'm at with Gio is I'm going to stick up for him a wee bit here, because, in terms of players maybe not playing for him, I think it's quite clear that the players aren't playing for him. The issue with that is we've seen this for these players before, time and time again, for the last 5 seasons now, 4 years, 5 seasons, where these guys have consistently, over a period, let us down. I'm talking about the first 2 years under Gerrard. After the winter break, they let us down. The third season, we won the league. Okay, that was obviously great, but the cups, they let us down. Last season, obviously, again, great getting to Europa League final, but I'm a wee bit uncomfortable with calling last season a success as such. Obviously, it was an amazing achievement doing what we did, but I think at Rangers, to call last season an actual proper success, you need to win the league, or if you don't win the league, you're going to have to win a European trophy as well, like a big, big trophy. And I just think, a lot of people were saying, well, Gio's lost the dressing room, blah, blah, blah. I think that's a fair enough comment, but could it not maybe be said that Gerrard lost the dressing room as well in his first couple of years? And you made the point there that we gave Gerrard all this time, and I think optics are, a wonderful thing to look at. I think people probably say the reason that we gave Gerrard time is, look at where we were before Gerrard came in. We could see the building blocks were in place, and it was all about progression and us getting back to the top. Whereas now Gerrard's gone. When Gio came in, we were at the top, and it was about adding to that. I think my sort of thing to that would be is, how can you expect Gio to take the club forward when he's got Gerrard's squad? Now, you can say that the players have been improved and all that, and your key assets like Kent, Morelos, Goldson, Tav had all improved under Gerrard. Obviously, your McGregor's, Davises were all going to be in decline anyway when Gio came in. But and people also mention the fact that we haven't sold our key assets. And one thing that I'll put that down to is, to be honest, Steven Gerrard. I think he's the reason why we never sold our key assets at the correct time. I think we all are probably in agreement that the right time to sell Kent and Morelos was probably after we won the league. The issue with that is Steven Gerrard wanted his cake and eat it. He put his foot down and he said, we're not selling our best players, we want to invest in the squad. And the board basically turned down and went to him, okay, that's fine. We're not going to sell our best players, but you need to qualify for the Champions League in order to add to the squad properly. And he didn't do that. He didn't qualify for the Champions League. And then people might say, well, you should have sold those guys in the summer. But the issue with that is, when you've got a year left on your contract, a lot of teams will probably just turn around and say, well, what's the point in bidding for them this summer when we can get them in a free next summer? And also as well, Morelos was injured. Do we even know that bids were made? We know that bids have been made for Kent and Morelos in the past, and Gerrard put his foot down on it. So I think, I think the Rangers now, it's a bit of a scattergun approach with a lot of fans. It's the board, it's Gio, it's Ross Wilson, it's this, that, the next thing. But none of it's really like, it's kind of structured in the sense that, people say, we want Gio out. Okay, fair enough. And then why do you want him out? Well, we never sold Kent and Morelos at the right time. I'm like, well, that's not Gio's fault. And I would even go as far to say, is that even the board's fault for not selling those players at the right time? Because Steven Gerrard put his foot down. He said he didn't want him to go. And from a personal point of view, I would rather that the board back the manager and said, aye, we're going to support you. If you don't want to sell your players, fine, we're not going to sell them. Obviously, you need to qualify for the Champions League. Now, the board didn't know that, 3 months after saying, I don't want to sell Kent and Morelos, Gerrard's going to be going down to Birmingham. Do you know what I mean? Like, you never knew that. But it is a bit of a mess. But I just thought I'd maybe get that wee bit in there. But Colin, you touched on it earlier, the Kamara incident. I think obviously he's had a wee moan at half time to the manager, etc. Again, maybe it sounds like I'm sticking up for the manager a wee bit here. I think Kamara's chucked it, to be honest, this season. He's not been good at all, apart for the PSV away game, in my opinion. I mean, for me, he's just somebody, he's probably our last remaining big asset as such that we can get a pretty decent fee for. In my opinion, I think we should just, if we can get a bid for him in January, just get rid of him.
I mean, I think to sort of defend Kamara a wee bit, I think when Aribo and Bassey went, I think that was obviously his two mates. That was his two sort of big pals, and wherever you seen him on social media and all the rest of it tended to be they two he was with. So those two are away, so his workplace has changed, and that's essentially what we're talking about here. We're talking about guys at their work. His workplace has changed. His two sort of closest buddies have went, so maybe that's had an impact, and maybe he thought he was going to get his move as well, and it's not happened. So he hasn't been the same player this season, there's no doubt about that. He has looked a wee bit lethargic. But I do think in terms of, I was talking about senior players that have sort of, let us down. We're not just talking about letting Gio down here, we're talking about letting us down. Fans that pay good money to go and watch Rangers, and we've paid fucking really good money this season for the Champions League. As Eck said earlier on, I think we could have ended up pointless anyway. It was just the nature of some of the performances and some of the defeats. The Ajax game in Amsterdam was really, really poor. Thought we played okay against Napoli. I would argue that was probably our best performance, especially the first hour of that game. The Liverpool game at Ibrox is obviously a disaster. It's just a nightmare. The didn't really expect anything, Napoli away. And then at Ibrox against Ajax, we were down to the bare bones that night, I felt. So we've paid top money to get really, really poor performances from some senior players. So it has been disappointing, but I don't think Glenn Kamara's the worst. I really don't. And I've always looked at Glenn Kamara as not someone who would give you problems in the dressing room. I think as a manager, he's someone that, will just get on with the job. So to see that he's almost, well, he is in dispute with Gio. Apparently there was a right sort of stramash at half time between him and Gio, and that makes me think that there's a real issue, because this is, how many players is that this season now? Matondo was disciplined earlier on for his attitude, for the situation with Morelos, now Kamara. So you start to look at the common denominator and think, well, actually, is it Gio? Is it the coaching staff? Is there a real issue here where players feel like that their views are being ignored? I was reading, I think it was in the Athletic, Jordan Campbell was saying there was an incident where Gio was having a go at Tav, telling him to do something, and Tav answered back quite sort of ferociously, snapped back at him as if, I'm doing whatever it was about. He was disagreeing with Gio, and it was quite evident that there was a disagreement. All these things point to a real problem with the relationship between the players and the manager. And, as I said earlier on, I just kind of wonder if that Dutch mentality is kicking in again. The Dutch are notorious for being quite arrogant, and, they're quite set in their ways, and it's their way or the highway, that kind of thing. Maybe that's part of Gio's character, I don't know. But in terms of Kamara, I don't think he's the worst. He's not been at his best this season. He has looked a bit, disinterested at times. But I've always looked at him as an honest pro. And if there's now issues with players like him, I am now looking at the management team and thinking, well, there must be an issue. If players who don't normally get involved in that, we expect it from anyone else. We get it every season for him. You know what I mean? There's some issue where he's, kicking off and managers have to discipline him. That's the kind of thing you expect for him. It's not the sort of thing you expect for Kamara. To hear that he was involved in something like that really made me think, right, there's real problems here, because he's not that. It doesn't strike me as that type of player. So I think his Rangers career's coming to an end, whether it's January or next season. It looks to me like he wants to move on. So hopefully, he'll get the move that he wants. If he doesn't want to be here, there's no point in him being here. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But I do kind of feel for Kamara a wee bit, because as I said, it doesn't really strike me as that type of player. He doesn't strike me as a problem character, and that he's now there is a problem surrounding him. You're like, whoa, right, what's going on here? Because I don't expect that for him.
No, I think you're right in the sense that I think he is the last guy. Apologies that we expect that to happen to. I think you made an interesting point there about the sort of discipline issues maybe between some of the players, and I know obviously you're saying they're the common denominator, and I would assume you would mean the manager in terms of that being the common denominator, but maybe looking at it from a different angle, these players maybe had the same issues with Gerrard as well. Obviously we know Morelos had these issues with Gerrard, but when you look back, how many times did Gerrard actually punish Morelos? Publicly anyway. I think the only time Morelos was dropped was, I think, the Hearts game in the Cup right before COVID, where he came back late for I don't know if it was international duty or it was on holiday back home in Colombia or something like that, but he came back late, and basically Gerrard went, no, that's it, you've taken the piss for the last 2 years, and this is me punishing you. With Gio, he done it pretty much straight away with Morelos. He dropped him for what we thought at the time anyway was like the most lucrative game for years at the club, with that PSV game away. Maybe it is just the case that the players are unhappy that Gio is maybe punishing them, and maybe doing it in a more public way than what Gerrard did. Maybe they are unhappy at that, and you can say that's the players' fault, you can say that's the manager's fault. I would say in terms of common denominators, maybe the players are also the common denominator there as well, because as I say, Morelos has had these issues under Gerrard. He's had these issues now under Gio. Alex Lowry's another one who, I've been told has been overweight. I know I've got a cheek to call anybody that, but I'm not a professional athlete. And apparently, since coming back from injury, his attitude's not been great. And you seen Gio get a wee bit riled in the press conference before the Hearts game, I think it was, talking about him, and obviously putting a bad performance against Hamilton that night. Although I heard he was good yesterday in the B team game. So I think that's an interesting point. And again, it's kind of like who is to blame? Is it the players? Is it the management? Is it a bit of both? And for me, we talk about common denominators. I will keep coming back to, I think the main culprits here are the players in the senior pros, because it's not something that, well, with Gio, he's been here for a year now, okay, and there's been small patterns that have emerged that you can maybe say that's an issue. Fair enough. But with these players in general, it's 5 seasons now that we've consistently seen this from them. And I think, in terms of the players, I think this squad had a role to play in Rangers history. I think this was a team to get us back to where we belonged, back to the top of Scottish football, give us a more respected name in European football as a whole. But clearly these guys do not have the mentality to push on and become a dynasty, which we all thought they could have done after winning that league. We all thought that they could have done it after that. But I think it's quite clear now, beyond any reasonable doubt, that for most of those players, their big thing was winning the league. And then, again, I don't want to say they're not trying or whatever, but I think, mentality-wise, these guys just don't have it in them to go in, year out, and win trophies for Rangers. And I'm not necessarily Gio in right now. I don't think a change of manager would be the worst thing right now, but I think I'm definitely 100% sort of core Gerrard players out. As difficult as that is to do, because you can't sack like 20 players, right? But I just find it, not us obviously, because I think we're quite calm in our deliberations, but you see a lot of comments online slagging the manager, slagging the coaching staff, blah, blah, blah. And it seems that a lot of these players get away with it scot-free, despite the fact that, as I said earlier, they've consistently let us down now for going on 5 years, a lot of them. And I think for most of them, it's just time to cut loose. Colin, I'll touch on a point that you made with Eck there, obviously, about the paying a lot of money this season. And that kind of comes into the next point about the board deck. And, we had the accounts come out, and look, we're not going to pretend we're accounting experts. We're no Celtic fans. We know how well versed in financials that they are. But are we maybe being a wee bit too hard on the board? I mean, just sort of a wee overview at the figures. I think it was about 6 million, profit before tax. 22 million quid came off the profits, in terms of 5 million quid paid out to King, 6.5 million to Bennett, 2 million to George Letham, 8.25 million to Sports Direct, in terms of getting the club back on a sort of even keel in terms of the investors taking their money back. Now, in my opinion, these guys have put in 85 million quid of their own money since 2015. I think they're entitled to take that money back at some point. We've obviously had a pretty good financial year. At the same time, though, I can understand the fans being a wee bit angry maybe with the optics and the communication at times. But
I think even Colin, myself, after that Ajax game, we're standing outside Ibrox, and we knew obviously we'd finished pointless, and we knew the goal difference was getting towards a record bad proportions, and they were kind of like, why are we no calling for the manager to sack this now? And we also were like, is it the board then? And even without having seen all this, we could surmise, well, there's guys on, and I think John McCallum said this as well on previous pods here. You can read in between the lines. You don't have to be, a genius to work out that the board were owed money and they'd be taking it back. The first time it was, I think you actually owe them some thanks for waiting until a point where there's, we've got into the Champions League before they're like, right, we're due that or whatever. Even though obviously it's all up to June 2022. For me, that's still the biggest news of the week. And you don't get, and despite what Stuart Cosgrove would say about the reason he supported St Johnstone in 2012, it seemed to be he only supported St Johnstone because their books always balanced, which is always the thing that set my heart aflutter when it came to the FITBA. I know how are the accounts, Brazil? But he started this thing where we only worried about accounts. Well, Rangers, Kieran Maguire, I think he's the man. He's a kind of financial expert. You can get him on Twitter. He did a wee thread on the morning, kind of explain it to Dumbles like me what had happened with the Rangers accounts, what they actually meant. And the bit that's the tweet for me that stood out was, I think it was turnover. In 2018, we had basically £70 million less turnover than Celtic. And this time, it's all about square. We're all about even level with Celtic. Now that, in the space of 4 years, is absolutely miraculous. That's a hell of an achievement. And I think amongst all this kind of criticism salad that's been thrown the way of, is it Gio? Is it the players? Is it the board? I think we talk about Gio, he doesn't know his tactic. He just kind of throws stuff at the board and throws stuff at the wall and sees what sticks. I think it's the same with a lot of the criticism being thrown at the club just now because we're not winning the league. For me, getting to a European final trumps winning the Scottish title. Even if you lose that final, that's nobody in the rest of Europe gives a shit who wins a league in Scotland. You only care about what you do in Europe. That's what raised our profile beyond belief. And I'm proud that Rangers sit there and we get beat 9-1 in aggregate by Liverpool, and we are disgusted with our team for that. Celtic get beat 8-1 in aggregate by Real Madrid, and they're greeting because they're so proud of themselves for scoring a free kick. You know what I mean? And you're telling you it's the best performance. I love that we're harsher in our team. We don't do the mockish stuff. We don't try to hide behind anything. But contained within all this criticism of Gio and the board and all that is actually defences. It's actually our achievements are actually. I love that at Rangers our achievements are actually hidden by the things we get wrong. Gerrard was getting slagged rotten the first 2 seasons for nobody able to go and win the league. But contained within that, hidden within that was the fact that we'd finished third in the first 2 seasons we get back up into the top flight. And Gerrard had us finishing like a comfortable second in terms of finishing, further ahead of Aberdeen or whoever was in third place. And then we were closer to Celtic the following season. Stuff that we don't want to talk about. We don't want to ever have to have seen Rangers in that position where they're needing to claw their way back. But common sense tells you these were massive achievements. And Giovanni Van Bronckhorst was under pressure at the end of last season because he didn't win a European final and he finished 4 points behind Celtic in the league title race. He threw away a lead that he created. That, when you think about, I bumped into a boy the other night, George, lovely fella, he's good lady wife. They'd been in Club 72 for the Hearts game, and George usually is in the Broomland. So if you're sitting next to George in the Broomland, he hates it. He doesn't want to go back. He said he loved Club 72. He doesn't want to go back and meet you boys again. He had a great time at the Hearts game, and he was saying his low was the Hibs game at Easter Road. Sorry, the Raith Rovers in the Challenge Cup final at Easter Road, and we all hated that day. That felt like a day we would never be in the position we are just now to be pissed off because we're definitely going to finish second at worst. We've been in the Champions League. We've been in a European final. We have to keep going forward. But I think that the club itself is getting to a stage where it's solid enough to be sold on to another board that maybe has the money that can finance us to be a Champions League team every season, to be winning the league at least every second season, and to get in the players that we need. You're talking about legacy. You're talking about creating a dynasty. That's what we hope we're going to go and retain the title on that once we win it. But I'm just reminded of the George Best thing. George Best, after the 68 European Cup final, George Best lamented the fact that Manchester United, didn't go on and create a dynasty that Liverpool then did the next decade when they won their first European Cup. Man, you were relegated within 4 or 5 years of winning the European Cup in 68. And it's a dangerous thing. That's what happens if you don't go forward, if you think you've done enough. But at the same time, that was because they were it was a target they'd set themselves after the disaster, the Munich air crash. They'd lost all the players. It was the senior players that had pushed on to get Man U to win that European Cup against Benfica at Wembley in 68. And George Best, a young guy, and I think for guys like me, my age, the disaster of 2012, I thought we could lose our club altogether. We might never have a Rangers to go and watch again, and to see them actually having won the league. And I know that kind of energy would have been translating itself to the players and everything they did. And I'm no surprised they actually took the foot off the gas, especially when their manager, was taking the foot off the gas, Gerrard, at the beginning of last season. It's only a natural thing. And I don't think we're a million miles away. I don't think Celtic are any great shakes. I think they're kind of deluding themselves about exactly how good they are. But they keep getting the results. They do keep getting the results. But they were in this position at the winter break last season. They were in this same position, having a jokey a draw at Paisley. They'd lost 2 or 3 games. They dropped points elsewhere. And they go in a raft of players. I don't think we can get a raft of players maybe back fit for this time next season, for the restart after the World Cup. It doesn't look likely that we're going to catch them. It doesn't look as if it's going to happen. We're maybe looking at rebuilding, but we are not a million miles away, and I'm not that unhappy. It's only up until the last week I could have defended Gio. It's only Gio's actual body language himself that's making me think he wants away. But I'm actually quite happy with everything. But I'm also as long as we keep having this energy for younger guys like yourself, Craig, younger supporters who want everything now, we need a combination of that plus the constant reminder of the context. And I'm afraid old fat guys like me are always here to remind you what the overall context is. But I'm not happy with the results on the part of the new other displays, obviously. But overall, I think the results were one of the most beautiful things. The financial results this week are one of the most beautiful things that have happened since 2012.
Well, that's it. I mean, I love your optimism as well. But I mean, in terms of the financial results for, I think it was Douglas Park that made the point when the accounts came out. It was about a 10-year plan. And Rangers, according to Kieran Maguire, are still in, as a business anyway, in recovery. And I know we all talk about 2012 and you get people that say, oh, well, it's, you can't talk about that, we've moved on. I mean, from a footballing point of view, I think on the pitch, that's a fair point. We're obviously nowhere near having Andy Little and, Big Jig up front anywhere, right? But from a financial point of view, we are still, dealing with that fallout. Even when it comes to stuff like the Champions League money and this 10-year coefficient payment, I think Celtic get an extra 6 or 7 million quid out of that just because they'd been in Europe 5 years longer than us. So I don't want to be the one that says, "Oh, I will look at it." We drew 1 each with St Mirren, but 10 years ago we were playing Brecon in a hedge. But it's like, I think from a financial point of view and stuff like that, I think it is completely relevant. But
it's an undertow, mate. There's always an undertow. Yeah. It's always pulling us back, and I think it's a balancing act between if you forget where you're going to end up overreacting and getting rid of people who have actually got the best will of the club at heart. A lot of us, we don't want to take on board how bad things have been, and there's still a reaction to that. But it's a delicate balancing act. We need to be making sure we're always going for the best to win everything all the time, but also watch just who we're kind of lashing out at when it doesn't go right,
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I mean, I do think that this board do have the best interest in the club at heart. I think we can all slag them in terms of communication and maybe other things that they haven't done right, and that's good. That's what you need at a club like Rangers. You need people to be held to account. But I do think as we say, sort of context needs to be put out. But after all that off-field stuff, we're unfortunately to talk about the football a wee bit, David. Yesterday's game, we'll just touch on it a wee bit. Obviously, I think we were better doing all that stuff first because I think the big issues are what people want to talk about and what they want to hear us talk about. The game yesterday, obviously, I won each draw. The thing for me was it was like the performance. We knew, I think, from the outset, basically how the game was going to go. Colin touched on sort of Morelos' body language and his performance yesterday, which was just, terrible and crap. Doesn't cut it for Morelos. And I think actually St Mirren's goal, I blame Morelos for St Mirren's goal because that stupid foul that he gives away at kick-off, which is just petty attention seeking, that allows St Mirren to get the ball up the park, which then results in a corner. Obviously King should do better, but it results for that, and we just didn't look as if we could be bothered scoring after that, could we?
I think the whole performance yesterday was pretty lacklustre. I think, get back to Wednesday night, briefly, to try and preface what I'm about to say about the performance yesterday. We obviously were scratching for form on Wednesday night, and we managed to go over the line. Come out of the game yesterday, they seem to be reasonably bright, but there's a lethargic element to Rangers play, Craig, which goes back further than Wednesday night. I think I look at guys like Malik Tillman, who he's a nice footballer, but he's lazy. I think I watched them against Ajax at Ibrox, and there's a clip doing around the internet where I think he's lucky that the Gio is his manager and no Joe Wallace will, because I think Joe would have put one in his chin for his absolute disgraceful lack of effort and passes that are playing that game. But maybe that is down to the fact that he's not our player, and you've got to watch what you're saying to another club's player. Guys like Scott Wright, bright, and passes in a play, he flatters to deceive. He's not good enough. I've come into this pod since the get-go, and I've tried to adopt a sanguine approach, but I think it's time for a few home truths. A lot of the players will be good enough. A lot of those players will never be good enough. Those two, I don't think I think they deserve to be in Rangers squads. That might sound a bit knee-jerk, but they'll be in Rangers squads because they're not getting anything else. I've heard people pointing the finger at players like Ryan Kent about not trying, about chucking it and what have you. I mean, you can maybe side with that depending on your point of view, but I think you seen yesterday the guy was trying. Won a penalty, which was, my gas was well and truly flavoured when Kevin Clancy decided to flash a yellow card at him and not give a penalty.
I wasn't, because we know what Kevin Clancy's like.
Well, I'll leave you to say that, Craig. But look, I think we can get backwards and forwards with this. The performance is only good enough, and it's thanks to the manager. And there might be, you said there before, disharmony in the dressing room, whatever. But he's the guy. The box starts with him. We can all talk about the board and Ross Wilson, his track record and recruitment and what have you, but we can only go with what's out in the park. And the style of play is slow, ponderous, lethargic. Just the whole thing just looks insipid, and it needs change. And the sooner we get it, the sooner we can all move on.
I mean, obviously the performance was terrible. I think, as I said before, the worst thing is we expected it. We knew exactly how that game was going to go. I mean, I agree with you in terms of the style of play. I think certainly for the, maybe from the Celtic game onwards, it's just been pretty lacklustre, bar one or two maybe decent performances in there. I will say, maybe as a wee retort, injuries don't help, and I'm not using injuries as an excuse, but I think when you've got the amount of players injured as we do, more so attacking players like Lawrence and Hadji and Roof, I think you're never ever going to be able to play the style of play that you want. And saying that, as I say, it's no an excuse. You should still be going out and beating St Mirren, you should still be going out and beating Livingston, you should still be going out and beating St Johnstone comfortably. But I do understand how the performances maybe wouldn't be as good sometimes. Obviously, Colin, David touched on it there. The penalty that was given after Mr. Clancy booked Kent for diving was obviously given with VAR. And I wanted to come on to you with this because I remember a few weeks ago, just before Val was introduced, we had a wee chat about it, and you were a wee bit trying to think the best way to describe it.
I don't like VAR. That's the best way to describe it.
You don't want it.
Absolutely fucking mental. That's what he's like with the VAR.
I'm trying to be. I'm glad you said it.
It sends them mental.
Aye, but the thing is, since Val's came in, I think there's been 5 games off the top of my head. The Livy game we had a decision goal for us. It wouldn't have happened. The game yesterday, obviously. The Aberdeen game, we got a decision. So 3 of the 5 games we've had decisions go for us with VAR, none against. Celtic have had 5 games, and we've seen them moaning recently about things. I think they've only had 1 decision go their way with VAR, and that was a penalty at Livy a couple of weeks ago. And pretty much every other game, they've had decisions go against them, mostly penalties with handballs. Because the Celtic players seem to have this knack of put their hands out in the box and moaning when a penalty gets given against them. I mean, I know it's been a wee bit weird having VAR in Scottish football, Colin, but what sort of your summary been on it so far, and what do you think it's been like?
I mean, when I've been at the games that I've been at Ibrox, I've felt it's been quite slow in coming to decisions, and that's one of that's. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think anyone can deny this. VAR is there. It's for TV viewers. It's for the fans watching at home, really, isn't it? You know what I mean? They're the ones that get the benefit of it. I feel when you're at the game, and I felt this at sort of the Europa League games that was used, and the Champions League. I feel sometimes you're standing there a little bit. Well, what's going on? It just comes up, VAR check, potential this, that. You're like, well, how did that come from? I remember was it the Bayer Leverkusen game when they got a penalty. They got a penalty early on, and it was such an innocuous sort of thing. I I don't even remember them claiming for a penalty. And then like 2 minutes later, it came up, possible penalty check. And you're like, at what end? What are they looking at? You know what I mean? So I feel it's been slow in Scotland. Some of the decisions have been really slow. I've never really been a big fan of it. You know, it works. I remember watching a game on the telly, and it was a German game, and it seemed to be a bit slicker over there. We're obviously just starting using it, and you know, you're going to get the teething problems. But I just look at the Premiership over the last couple of years since it's been in, and every episode you watch Match of the Day, there's issues and, you know, people complaining, and it's just not for me, and I don't think it ever will be. To me, it's just an extra layer. I've wondered. I can't remember who suggested it. It might have been Ross, who used to host the pod, but someone said to me about using it in the same way that tennis use it. You know, you've got 3 sort of strikes of saying we want that checked. I think that would be a good way of using it. You know, then it's down to the teams. It's down to the captain to say, right, they've just scored a goal. We think it's offside. Can you check that? Or we think that was a penalty. You know, you can challenge the on-field decision. The now, I just feel it gets involved too often. And I'm not a fan. And that's it. And I don't think I ever will be. I get that it worked for us yesterday. But there have been decisions that I've thought, shouldn't need VAR for that. You know what I mean? It's so blatant that you shouldn't need VAR for that. I just think we should focus on increasing the standard of the referees in this country, because at the end of the day, VAR is still, we're looking for this perfect system that's never going to be there, because human error is always going to creep in. You know, someone's going to see something and make a call that's wrong, and that's it. You know, goal line technology, that's great. The man at the ball crosses the line, the referee's watch goes, boom. That's pretty much perfect. With VAR, it's human error, and you're always going to get it. So it's never going to fix it. And look at that shower out of the road with it. You know what I mean? They've just been all over it the minute it's arrived. You know, they've had no real decisions that have cost them a game. And every single week, Sutton, Hartson, Tom Boyd, all the usual nuggets. The minute the game finishes, you know, they're all over VAR. And we know what they're saying. You know, we know what they're implying with their complaints. And that's what pisses me off. I just don't think our game is mature enough for VAR, to be honest with you. I think there's so much pettiness up here that it's just going to make it even more tedious.
I mean, I think your last point there about Celtic's quite funny. I mean, it's just that for me, it is typical Celtic. Do you know what I mean? It's like, when decisions are going against you and you're winning the games, you know, get it in people's ears that you're still the victim, because that means that you're doing something in spite of something. And then when you eventually get a decision against you that costs you points, you know, then it's a big conspiracy. It's kind of the same with Celtic.
Well, I mean, how many trophies have they won over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years?
I know.
You know what I mean? And
the fans released a documentary about refereeing decisions when they were on the cusp of winning like their 7th league on the bounce.
No, it's and that's Celtic are in a sort of, they're in a unique position where they're kind of the establishment club in Scotland. You know, they're the club that's been sort of dominant over the last few years, but they still want to play the underdog and they still want to play the victim. Mm-hmm. And you know what really pisses me off? They get away with it. No one really challenges that sort of narrative from them in media. No one picks them up and says, well, wait a minute. You know what I mean? You've won X amount of trophies. VAR hasn't cost you any points. You're 9 points clear going into this break. What's your problem? But no, they're just allowed to do what they do.
Aye, and I think one thing as well is any Celtic fan or anyone at Celtic actually considered that the decisions made against them might actually be the correct decisions? Because, well, looking back at them, I mean, I've never seen the penalty incident for the Ross County game at the weekend, but as far as I'm concerned, every decision that's been given against them has been the right decision. So, aye, but there you go. Just before we finish up, then we do need to talk about the future. Can I say that's why we need VAR.
We need to apply every single bit of objective refereeing we possibly can. We can't give in to Celtic because they will do that all the time. They won a fucking league title by shouting louder. They want this whole thing where they act completely petulantly and they're like totally denying reality. You can't. VAR is no perfect, obviously, but it's another way of analysing. We're all sitting here thinking, what are they complaining about? Because we can actually see it because there are television cameras in the grounds, and you're using them to highlight the fact that what they're complaining about is bollocks. You know, we can't let them. If you imagine if we'd actually, even if we'd been in Celtic's position in 2020 when the season was curtailed because of COVID, you know, when they were like 9 points clear or whatever it was, if we'd called a league title in our favour, eight games unplayed, it was 9 games we hadn't played, that would be a complete meltdown. That would never have been allowed to happen because they have this political power just now. You know, so you need to have VAR and any other kind of method of analysing what's actually happening, because football is so subjective. You know, and that's what I love about VAR. It's showing folk that basically it relies on subjectivity. The whole handball thing, it's all been obfuscated in this kind of VAR general argument. You know, it's just the R in VAR stands for refereeing. It's another tier, another method of refereeing. It's like a linesman or whatever, adding something to help the referee on the park. Yesterday, we completely benefited from it. We benefited from it all the way through that run we had in the Europa League last season. And some of the goal we got against Brøndby, for example, when we beat them at Ibrox. That was literally a ball here. No even the players, no even the guys analysing it on television thought it was anything other than a mile offside. And the VAR goes on and it shows everybody that it was actually completely onside. You know, so stuff like that. I don't have a problem with that. The delays it's causing, you know, absolutely. You know, but to me, 30 years ago, the pass-back rule came in. So we've been getting faster games for the last 30 years anyway, as far as I'm concerned. We need something to slow it down a bit to my pace. But no, I think if you've got cameras in a stadium, you'll get teams like Celtic using that evidence, whatever they can. We had seen a World Cup final decided by VAR. The Italians used it in 2006 because there was televisions in the stadium in the World Cup final when Zidane put the head Materazzi. Because they have that Celtic attitude of running about, complaining, making sure the game doesn't restart until they've put enough pressure on somebody to say, going to get that decision for us. Yeah. So we need to make sure it's at least Celtic are going to keep being Celtic. You know, Colin's absolutely right. It's an article of faith with Celtic fans that they have to be subjugated, and they've shat themselves. What happened in 2012 to us should have happened to Celtic as far as they're concerned, in a way. You know, it should have been the Queen. You know, HMRC was, you know, putting them out of business. That's the narrative, and it's really messed them up that it happened to us. And they've been the big bad team, you know, so they need to up this ante. And you're quite right as well that what they're doing just now is they're fixing the roof while the sun shines until they do get a decision that goes against them, and they can say, well, we've been saying for the very start that this has been against us. We can't give into this stuff. We've got to keep applying every method of cold, hard analysis to football we can, while Celtic are trying to shout it down and just greet the loudest until somebody gives them a league title. You know what I mean? So that's, for me, VAR is a part of helping us towards that. You know, and I mean, it's going to, if folk don't like it, it's going to go anyway. You know what I mean? But I've quite enjoyed that aspect of it.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the decision that made me laugh the most was the Jota one, the offside against Motherwell. And it's like, we get the TV angle was bad, right? But trying to explain to a Celtic fan that the angle that the referees have in the VAR room and the angle that you're showing in TV are two different angles. They use a Hawkeye system for the offsides, right? So if you're offside, you're offside. There's no question about it or not. Now, obviously, the angle that we were showing in the TV and all that, you know, it's debatable whether he's offside or not. If you're like that, you can't prove that he is, you can't prove that he isn't. But they use a different system in the refereeing room. Do you know what I mean? Which shows you're offside or not. That's why, if you notice, see the offside decisions with VAR, the referee just does that. He doesn't go and look at it at the telly because it's we offside. It's you know, black or white. You're offside or you're no offside. With penalties, handballs, fouls, blah blah blah. The referee will need to go and look at it again and make his decision because obviously, you know, that's down to interpretation. But with offside, you're either offside or no.
And I think that's what it's done. I think that's what it's done. It's actually showed folk what the rules are. Football doesn't exist without the rules. And that's what helps it be a beautiful game. You're playing within the rules, you know, and even bending the rules as part of the game. You know what I mean? But it's actually showed folk exactly what you don't want to know, which is you can be offside by a toenail or whatever, because the rules have got to start at some point, you know. And I'm just trying to show Colin. I'm always accusing him of getting too uptight with VAR. I'm just trying to be the one that's going mental with VAR in the night.
No, that's good. But David, just on the future then, I mean, I know you've made your position on the manager very clear, but I think we've heard rumours tonight about a press conference tomorrow and all that, which is just total nonsense, by the way, to all the viewers at home and across the world. we're not saying that he will or he won't get sacked, but there's not been a press conference that's been called for tomorrow. So I don't know if that's put people at ease or just made people more angry. You can be the judge of that. But David, let's move forward then in terms of how we progress with the season, and let's just assume that Gio's going to be there, because I genuinely don't think the board are going to sack him right now, and I think that's whether people want it to happen or not. I think obviously that's one thing. I think the actual act of it happens another. So if he is still in charge, let's see him stay until the rest of the season. How are we supposed to sort of kick on and what would constitute actually success for moving on now?
Success would be a repeating the last season in reverse. Albeit you could leave aside a European run. But we certainly want to reduce the arrears to Celtic. That goes without saying. I think the style of play needs to improve, but as you rightly mentioned earlier on, Craig, we need players back. We're missing players. So that'll obviously have a bearing in how fruitful the recovery might be, for want of a better expression. I think going forward, more on the basis that Gio remains in situ and as the manager to the end of the season, I think the focus shifts now onto Ross Wilson and the scouting department about who's going to come in and replace the players that are out of contract at the end of the season. Now, there's a raft of them. As players like Philip Bland and Ryan Jack going to be offered new deals. Are the players that like Scott Arfield, Stephen Davis and Alan McGregor, they're going to be offered new deals? I would like to hope not. You can maybe see a case for Scott Arfield slightly, but Stephen Davis, I think his time as a Rangers player is due to come to its natural conclusion. So, and he's one of many. I think recruitment has to be better. You guys have been mentioned that they're about whether criticism of the board's fair with regards to the financials, but all that's well and good, and it's you've got to bear it in mind and try to come to a balanced and a reasoned approach to what's went before. But I think it's fair to say that the board have been guilty of squandering a lot of money under several managers with some of their patchy recruitment. And I think that it's high time that the recruitment side of things is vastly improved. Now, I'm looking at Ridvan Yilmaz. That's a guy that came in for very decent money, reported, in the press, hardly featured for whatever reason, whether the manager deems him not good enough or not ready yet or whatever. We can't afford as a club, given financial fair play and homegrown talent or homegrown trained strictures that are placed upon us, which are every club subject to the participation in European competition. That makes the pressure to get things right in the transfer market and the recruitment side of things all the greater. And I think that's something that we need to up the ante on. Now, the director of football may well have delivered his remit to the board in terms of bringing in money for players and the club qualifying for the Champions League. But when money's so scarce, we've got to get our recruitment absolutely spot on. Yes, there's going to be slippage. The odd player might come off, but there have been too many players have come into the Rangers squad, especially this season, who have not hit the ground running. Rabbi Matondo, he looks like he's won a competition to get a spot in the Rangers squad for a lot of people. And the recruitment's just going to be better, Craig. And we've got a lot of guys that there's going to be a turnover next season for whoever, whether it's Giovanni Van Bronckhorst or any other person that's in the managerial hot seat. So we've got to get that right. And I think if we make some decent pre-contract agreements, maybe in the closed season, that might go some way to quelling the disquiet amongst the supporters, because there's, as you guys have discussed at length, there's a multitude of factors which are contributing to the disgruntlement amongst the support. A lot of it off the field. But for the most of us, we concentrate this on the field. Recruitment's a factor and an input into what's going on the pitch, and it's got to be there, Craig. It's as simple as that.
No, I think that's a good point to end on in terms of being better, and it's certainly going to be an interesting sort of few weeks and months ahead at the club. So, guys, thank you very much for joining us, and that's it, everyone. That's us, not just for a week or a few days, whatever. That's us until after the World Cup. It's a weird World Cup, and Qatar, where, they've got the human rights in order in the winter as well. So it's a strange one, but that's us until then. In terms of our sort of normal weekly pods, I believe we will be looking to, over the World Cup break, have a couple of wee sort of feature pods just to keep you entertained. And I think we're going to probably try and do that maybe at the same time as the sort of less than popular World Cup games are on. So maybe when like Qatar are playing Ecuador or something like that, and you don't want to watch that, you can come and listen to us ramble on about something Rangers related. And just a wee reminder, guys, you can keep up on the Twitter page and the forums over at gersnet.co.uk, and we'll let you know about it. But all that's left to do then is thank the guests for coming on. Colin, thanks very much. Eck, thanks very much.
Pleasure.
David, thanks very much.
Cheers, Craig.
Thanks very much, guys, again, and we'll see you after the World Cup. I've been Craig Gray, hosting the Gersnet Podcast, and bye for now.